All right, everyone, buckle up. It's time for another deep dive. And this time, we're tackling cloud security, specifically the CCSP exam.
Oh, yeah, the CCSP, a real beast of an exam.
It covers a lot, doesn't it? I mean, if you're prepping for it, you know what I'm talking about. But hey, no worries, right? That's why you're here.
We're going to break it all down.
Today, we're all about those practical, need-to-know concepts. You know, the ones that'll probably pop up on the exam.
Absolutely the must-knows.
So let's imagine, okay, first day on the job, you're a cloud security pro. What are you facing?
What kind of tools are you using? You've got to think like you're really there, in the trenches.
Right, right. It's not just theory, it's real-world stuff.
Exactly. One of the first things you'll realize is that securing access, well, it's a whole different game in the cloud.
Different game, how so?
We're not talking about just, locking the server room door anymore.
Yeah, no more deadbolts, no security guards patrolling the halls.
It's all about remote access now, right?
So how's that game changed?
Think about it. Remember those old school KVMs?
KVMs?
Those boxes, that let you control multiple servers from one keyboard, video, and mouse. Well, they've gone virtual.
So it's like handing someone the keys to your server, but digitally.
Precisely. And that brings us to two tools you absolutely need to master. RDP and SSH.
RDP, SSH. Okay, lay it on me.
RDP, that's Remote Desktop Protocol, your go-to for those Windows servers.
Windows, got it.
Imagine screen sharing, but on steroids. You're controlling the whole server remotely, usually through port 3389.
3389 for RDP. Okay, taking notes. What about SSH?
Now, SSH, Secure Shell, it does the same thing, but for Linux servers.
Okay, so same concept, just an operating system.
And it happens through a command line interface on port 22.
All right, port 22 for SSH. Got it. Those port numbers are definitely going straight into my cheat sheet.
Oh, for sure, those are exam gold.
But let's back up a bit. Big picture time. If I'm responsible for securing these remote access methods, what's my top priority?
Lockdown, my friend. We're talking Fort Knox level security here.
Okay, break it down for me. How do we achieve Fort Knox level security?
Strong authentication is non-negotiable. Complex passwords, multi-factor authentication, the whole 9 yards.
No shortcuts on that one. Got it. What else?
Then there's the principle of least privilege. You only give users the bare minimum access they need, absolutely nothing more.
Need to know basis, right? Makes sense. Anything else?
And finally, you absolutely have to limit network access. VPNs, those are your trusted tunnels. Think of them as secure highways for your data.
Fewer entry points, the better. So we've got our servers on lockdown, but what about the bigger picture? What about protecting the overall network?
Now you're talking, that's where security zones come in. Imagine a castle with multiple layers of defense.
I like this. Layers of defense, like an onion.
You got it. Each layer with its own purpose and security level.
Okay, so what are these layers? What are we talking about here?
You've got your classic zones, the internet, and that intriguing DMZ, the demilitarized zone.
DMZ sounds dangerous.
Think of the DMZ like a moat, okay, with a drawbridge.
Yeah.
It houses systems that are exposed to the internet.
Okay, so like our web servers.
Yeah.
Our email servers.
Yeah.
The things that need to be accessible from the outside.
You got it. But it keeps that inner sanctum, the internet, safe and sound.
So even if the attackers get through the DMZ, they still have another wall to climb to reach the internet.
You got it. Brilliant. Right.
It's like a double layer of protection. Pretty clever. But wait, didn't you say something about a new sheriff in town?
Oh, yeah. Don't forget about zero trust. That's the game changer.
Zero trust. Sounds serious.
It is. It's like saying trust no one, not even your own shadow.
So no free passes just because a device or user is inside the network?
Nope. Everyone and everything needs to be verified every single time.
It's like that saying, trust but verify, but amped up, right?
Exactly. Never trust, always verify. It's a whole new way of thinking about security.
Okay, I see the logic there. But let's be real for a second. We're not just dealing with machines here, are we?
Oh, absolutely not. The human element, that's huge in cloud security. You can't just focus on firewalls and forget about the people involved.
Right, right. So who are the players in this game?
You've got your vendors, your customers, partners, and then, of course, the regulators.
Regulators, yikes.
And clear communication with each of these groups, it's critical, absolutely critical, like make or break important.
Okay, I can see how things could get messy if everyone isn't on the same page.
Yeah.
Why is communication so important? Give me an example.
Think about security updates, right? You need to make sure everyone knows what's happening, why those updates are important, and how to implement them securely.
Makes sense. What about if something goes wrong?
Exactly. Like, what about incident response? If there's a breach, clear communication, that can be the difference between containing the problem and, well, total disaster.
Okay, I'm seeing the bigger picture here.
Mm,
Communication keeps everyone informed, prepared. It's like that saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
precisely. And it's not just about being proactive, it's also about knowing how to react effectively when things go wrong.
Okay, so if we had to pick, which group is the trickiest to communicate with and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one. But I'd say regulators, definitely regulators.
Why regulators? They seem pretty straightforward.
You got to be transparent, but also careful about what you share.
Walking that tightrope.
Exactly. And sometimes, legal advice is your best friend when dealing with regulators.
Makes sense. You don't want to say the wrong thing and end up in hot water.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember that laws, they often dictate how and when you communicate, especially after a security breach. You really need to know those regulations.
So we've talked about securing access, building those security zones, the importance of communication. It's like we're laying the foundation for a secure cloud environment.
We are. But there's still a lot more to cover.
Oh, I know. We're just getting started. And that's why we're here. We're going to dive deeper into those essential cloud security concepts to help you ace that CCSP exam. So stay tuned because we've got a lot more ground to cover.
There's so much more to come.
Buckle up, everyone.
It's going to be a wild ride. When we talk about application security, people often think it's just about finding and fixing vulnerabilities in the code. But it's really so much more than that.
Yeah, you're right. It's easy to get caught up in the technical nitty-gritty. So what's missing from that picture?
Well, the CCSP exam really wants you to understand the bigger picture. It's about managing risks across that whole application lifecycle, from the initial design all the way to deployment and even beyond.
So not just building a secure app, but keeping it secure over time.
Exactly. Think of it like you're building a car. You wouldn't just focus on making the engine safe and forget about the brakes or the steering wheel.
Right? You need to think about security holistically. I like that analogy. So if we're looking at that application lifecycle, where do we even begin? What are the key security considerations early on?
Well, right from the design phase, you need to be thinking about security requirements and threat modeling.
Okay, security requirements seem pretty straightforward, but break down threat modeling for me. What is that exactly?
So threat modeling is basically putting yourself in the attacker's shoes. You're trying to identify potential threats to your application, understand how they might exploit those vulnerabilities, and then design defenses to mitigate those risks. It's like a proactive security strategy.
So instead of just reacting to threats after they occur, you're anticipating them and building in safeguards from the very beginning. That makes a lot of sense.
It does. And once you have those security requirements and threat model in place, then you can start thinking about specific security controls to implement during the development phase.
So that's where things like secure coding practices, vulnerability scanning, penetration testing come into play.
You got it. Those are all critical for identifying and fixing vulnerabilities early on before they can be exploited.
So many things to keep track of. Are there any frameworks or models out there that can help guide developers and security teams through this whole process?
Absolutely. There are several widely recognized frameworks out there, like the OWASP SAM, that's the Software Assurance Maturity Model, or the BSIM, the Building Security in Maturity Model. These frameworks provide a really structured approach to building security into the software development lifecycle.
It's like having a roadmap for building secure applications. So those frameworks are valuable, but let's say we've done everything right during design and development, or we've built a secure application. Are we done?
Not quite. Security is an ongoing process. Once your application is deployed, you need to continue monitoring it for new vulnerabilities, implementing security updates, and responding to any incidents that may occur.
So even after all that hard work up front, we can't just set it and forget it. We need to stay vigilant.
Exactly, and that's where things like vulnerability management and incident response come into play. You need processes in place to identify, assess, and remediate vulnerabilities as they are discovered. You also need that well-defined incident response plan. That way you can quickly and effectively contain and recover from any security incidents.
So it's like a continuous cycle of security
Yeah.
improvements. You're constantly assessing, protecting, detecting, responding, and recovering.
You got it. And that life cycle perspective is really important for the CCSP exam. They want to see that you understand that cloud security isn't just about implementing a bunch of technical controls, but it's about managing risks across that entire application life cycle.
Makes sense. It's a holistic approach.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about something that I know keeps a lot of cloud security pros up at night. Compliance.
Compliance, often seen as the less glamorous side of cloud security, but it's absolutely crucial.
Yeah, it can definitely feel like wading through a mountain of regulations and acronyms. So why is compliance so important in the cloud?
Well, for starters, there are legal and regulatory requirements that organizations need to comply with. It all depends on their industry, their location, the types of data they handle.
Right, so things like HITUO for healthcare data or PCI DSS for payment card information.
Exactly. And failure to comply with these regulations can lead to hefty fines, legal action, and damage to your reputation. But it's not just about avoiding penalties. Compliance can actually help improve your overall security posture.
Really? How so? It always seems like compliance is about checking boxes, not necessarily improving security.
Well, think about it this way. A lot of compliance frameworks, they're based on industry best practices and standards. So by adhering to these frameworks, you're essentially implementing a set of proven security controls and processes that can help reduce your risk.
Okay, so it's like having a set of guardrails to keep you on the right track, even if you might not fully understand the reasons behind every single rule.
That's a good way to put it. And the CCSP exam definitely tests your understanding of various compliance frameworks and how they apply to cloud security.
All right, so I'm starting to see the value of compliance, even if it can feel a bit overwhelming at times. What are some of the key frameworks that our CCSP test takers should be familiar with?
Well, some of the big ones include ISO 27001 for information security management, SOC 2 for security, availability, confidentiality, processing integrity, and privacy, and of course the Cloud Security Alliance's Cloud Controls Matrix, or CCM.
Okay, that's a lot of acronyms. Can you give me a quick rundown of each of these frameworks and what they focus on?
Sure. So ISO 27001, it's a broad standard, covers all aspects of information security management. It provides a framework for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving an ISMS, that's an information security management system.
So it's like a comprehensive blueprint for building a secure organization covering everything from risk management to incident response.
You got it. SOC 2 is a bit more focused. It's specifically designed for service providers who store or process customer data in the cloud. It provides a framework for demonstrating that you have appropriate controls in place to protect the security, availability, confidentiality, processing integrity, and privacy of that data.
So if I'm using a cloud provider to store my sensitive data, a SOC 2 report can give me some assurance that they're taking security seriously.
Exactly. And finally, the Cloud Controls Matrix, the CCM, it's a comprehensive set of security controls specifically designed for cloud environments. It's a great resource for organizations looking to build that secure cloud infrastructure and demonstrate compliance with various regulatory requirements.
Okay, so we've got ISO 27001 for a broad security framework, SOC 2 for cloud service providers, and the CCM for specific cloud security controls. That's incredibly helpful. But let's move on to another important aspect of cloud security, risk management.
Risk management, the heart and soul of security. It's all about identifying, assessing, and mitigating potential threats to your organization's assets.
Sounds pretty straightforward in theory, but I imagine it gets quite complex in practice, especially in the cloud.
It definitely can. In the cloud, you have this shared responsibility model where both the cloud provider and the customer have roles to play in managing risk.
Right, so the cloud provider is responsible for securing the underlying infrastructure, while the customer is responsible for securing their own applications and data.
That's the gist of it. But understanding where those responsibilities lie can be tricky. It's essential for effective risk management.
So how do we even go about managing risk in this shared responsibility model? What are some of the key steps involved?
Well, the first step is to identify your assets. What are those most critical systems, applications, data that you need to protect?
Okay, so identify what's important, what we need to protect. What's next?
Then you need to assess the risks to those assets. What are the potential threats, both internal and external? How likely are those threats to occur? What would be the impact if they did?
So we're thinking about things like data breaches, denial of service attacks, even natural disasters or human error.
You're on the right track. Once you've identified and assessed those risks, Then you can start developing mitigation strategies.
And that's where those security controls we've been talking about come in, right? Things like encryption, access controls, firewalls, intrusion detection systems.
Exactly. But it's not just about implementing technical controls. Risk management also involves things like policies, procedures, and training to address those human factors.
Right, because even the most secure systems can be compromised if the people using them aren't aware of security best practices.
You got it. And it's important to remember that risk management is an ongoing process. You need to continuously monitor the threat landscape, reassess your risks, and adjust your mitigation strategies accordingly.
It's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse trying to stay one step ahead of the attackers.
It can feel that way sometimes, but it's crucial for maintaining a secure cloud environment. And the CCSP exam really emphasizes the importance of a proactive and comprehensive approach to risk management.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces of the puzzle fit together. Security controls, compliance, risk management, it's all interconnected. But let's talk about something a bit more tangible, the actual technologies used to secure cloud environments.
Sure, let's delve into the world of cloud security tools and technologies. There's a wide range of solutions out there, each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I imagine it can be overwhelming to keep up with all the latest and greatest security tools. What are some of the key categories that our CCSP prepper should be familiar with?
Well, you have your foundational security tools like firewalls, intrusion detection and prevention systems, or IDPS, and security information and event management, or SOM solutions. These are your bread and butter security tools that are essential for any environment, including the cloud.
Okay, so those are the classics that we've been using for years in traditional IT environments. How do they translate to the cloud?
They're still relevant in the cloud, but they often need to be adapted or deployed differently. For example, traditional firewalls, they might not be as effective in a cloud environment where traffic is constantly changing and scaling. So you might need to use cloud-native firewalls or virtual firewalls that can adapt to that dynamic nature of the cloud.
Makes sense. What about intrusion detection and prevention systems? How have they evolved for the cloud?
Well, traditional IDPS solutions often rely on analyzing network traffic to detect and prevent intrusions. But in the cloud, network traffic patterns can be much more complex and harder to monitor. So cloud-native IDPS solutions might use different techniques, like analyzing logs or user behavior, to identify that suspicious activity.
It's all about adapting those traditional security tools to the unique challenges of the cloud. What about SIEM solutions? How are they used in cloud security?
IAM solutions are essential for collecting, analyzing, and correlating security data from various sources. In a cloud environment, this could include logs from your cloud provider, your own applications, your security tools. By aggregating all this data into a single platform, you can get a more comprehensive view of your security posture and more easily identify potential threats.
It's like having a central nervous system for your cloud security, collecting and analyzing data from all over the environment. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
But those are just the foundational tools, right? What about more specialized cloud security solutions?
Right. On top of those foundational tools, you've got a whole ecosystem of specialized cloud security solutions that are emerging.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, there are cloud access security brokers, or CASBs. They act as a gatekeeper between your users and cloud applications. They're enforcing security policies and providing visibility into cloud usage.
So if I've got employees accessing all sorts of cloud apps, a CASB can help me control what they can do and see what they're up to.
Exactly. Then you have cloud workload protection platforms, or CWPPs, which are designed to secure the workloads running in your cloud environment, whether they're virtual machines, containers, or serverless functions.
So it's like having specialized security software for each type of cloud workload, protecting them from specific threats.
Precisely. And don't forget about cloud security posture management, or CSPM solutions. These tools help you assess and manage the security configuration of your cloud environment, ensuring that you're following best practices and complying with relevant regulations.
So if I'm worried about misconfigurations or security gaps in my cloud setup, a CSPM tool can help me identify and fix those issues.
Exactly. And that's just scratching the surface. The cloud security landscape is constantly evolving with new threats and new technologies emerging all the time.
I can definitely see why staying on top of all of this can be a full-time job. What's the best way for our CCSP test taker to keep up with all these changes?
Well, continuous learning is key. There are great resources out there. industry blogs, podcasts, webinars, and training courses that can help you stay informed about the latest cloud security threats, technologies, best practices.
Right. And certifications like the CCSP itself are a great way to validate your knowledge and demonstrate your commitment to cloud security.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to experiment and get hands-on experience with different cloud security tools and technologies. That's the best way to really understand how they work and how to effectively use them to protect your cloud environment.
You've given us so much to think about today. It's clear that cloud security is a multifaceted and constantly evolving field. Is there anything else our listeners should know as they continue on their CCSP journey?
One of the things that always fascinates me about cloud security is that it's not just about the technology, it's about people.
You're absolutely right. We can talk all day about the tools and techniques, but at the end of the day, it's people who are designing, building, deploying, and managing these systems.
Exactly. And that human element, it's both a strength and a weakness.
How so?
Well, people can be your greatest asset when it comes to security, but they can also be your biggest vulnerability.
That makes sense. So how do we address that human element in cloud security? What should our CCSP prepper be thinking about?
One of the most important things is security awareness training. You need to educate your employees about the threats they face, the policies they need to follow, best practices for staying safe in the cloud.
Right, because even with the most sophisticated security controls, they won't be effective if people are clicking on phishing links or using weak passwords.
Exactly. And it's not just about teaching people what not to do, it's also about empowering them to be part of the security solution.
So encouraging them to report suspicious activity, to ask questions if they're unsure about something, being proactive about security.
Exactly. You want to create a culture of security where everyone feels responsible for protecting the organization's assets.
That makes a lot of sense. But security awareness training, that's just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Hmm.
What else should we be considering when it comes to that human element?
Well, another really important aspect is identity and access management, or IAM. This is all about controlling who has access to what resources in your cloud environment.
Okay, so this goes back to that principle of least privilege we talked about earlier. Only give people the access they absolutely need to do their jobs.
Precisely. And in the cloud, IAM can get pretty complex because you might have users accessing resources across multiple cloud platforms using different devices from different locations.
So you need a robust IAM solution that can handle all of that complexity and enforce your security policies consistently.
You got it. And don't forget about things like multi-factor authentication. Adding that extra layer of security by requiring users to provide multiple forms of identification before they can access sensitive resources.
Right, so even if someone steals your password, they still can't get in unless they have your phone or your security token as well.
Exactly. And as we move more and more towards that zero trust approach, strong authentication becomes even more critical.
Okay, this is all incredibly helpful, but let's be realistic for a second. No matter how much we prepare, sometimes things just happen. There might be a breach, a misconfiguration, some other security incident. What do we do when things go wrong?
That's where incident responder comes in. You know it's not a matter of if but when you'll face a security incident in the cloud. The key is to be prepared.
Okay, deep breaths, everyone. Incident response. It sounds intense. What are the absolute essentials that our CCSP test taker needs to know?
First and foremost, you need a plan. Not just some vague idea of what to do, but a documented incident response plan that's been tested. This plan outlines exactly who does what, when, how you communicate, how you contain and recover from an incident.
So it's like a fire drill, but for cyber attacks. You don't want to be figuring out who to call when the building's already on fire.
Exactly. And the CCSP exam, they will definitely test you on those different phases of incident response: preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication and recovery, and of course, those all-important lessons learned.
Okay, so let's say the worst happens and there's a breach. What are some of the key steps in that containment phase you mentioned?
Think of it as damage control. First, you want to isolate the affected systems to prevent that attack from spreading. You need to gather evidence to really understand what happened. And of course, you need to notify all the appropriate stakeholders.
Okay, so who are those stakeholders again? It seems like a lot of people need to be kept in the loop.
It really depends on the severity of the incident, but it could include your internal teams, customers, partners, legal counsel, even law enforcement or regulatory bodies in some cases. Communication is key here, and it needs to be clear, accurate, and timely.
Got it. And what about that lessons learned phase? What's the point of dissecting a security incident after the fact?
It's all about continuous improvement. You want to figure out what went wrong, how the attackers got in, and what you can do to prevent it from happening again. This might involve updating your security controls, refining your incident response plan, or even providing additional training for your team.
So it's like a post-game analysis for your security team. Figure out what worked, what didn't, and how to play even better next time.
You got it. And remember, the CCSP exam isn't just about memorizing a bunch of facts. It's about understanding how all these concepts and principles work together to create a truly comprehensive cloud security strategy.
We've covered so much in this deep dive. Securing remote access, managing data security, building those secure applications, responding to incidents, understanding compliance and risk management, exploring all those cloud security tools and technologies. I feel like I have a much better grasp of what it takes to secure the cloud.
I'm glad to hear it. But remember, this is just the beginning. The world of cloud security is constantly evolving, so continuous learning is essential.
Solid advice. To our listener out there prepping for that CCSP exam, remember, you've got this. Keep studying, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to ask questions. And hey, if you ever need a quick refresher, you know where to find us.
Exactly. We're here to help you navigate this exciting and ever-changing world of cloud security.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question. We talked a lot about zero trust today, but if you can't trust any device or user by default, how does that fundamentally change how you approach security monitoring and incident response? It's something to ponder as you continue your CCSP journey.
That's an excellent point to consider. Until next time, keep learning, stay curious, and stay secure.
And as always, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.